From the dark mists comes a shape. It moves like a shadow. And as it moves into the light, you see that it is three doughy nerds recording a podcast. Welcome to the Halloween special of Roll Up and Die. Live! I'm Matt from the channel you're watching, A Fistful of Dice. Who's going to go next?
I'm Barker from Be a Better Game Master, and the guy that was just about to try to do an organ impression, and everyone's happy he didn't.
Like a liver or something? Or?
Yeah, one or two.
I'm going to metastasize some food. No, and I'm Alex, a.k.a. Captain Gothnog from, Captain Gothnog. So,
Captain Gothnog from Captain Gothnog. I am broadcasting here from the utter darkness of the Pacific Northwest. No, I left the lights off tonight in my office because I thought it would be more Halloween-y. And like I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about vampires in this live episode of Roll Up and Die. You might be watching us live. You may be watching or listening to this later as we post it on our podcast. But either way, thank you for joining us. And happy Halloween, everybody. I don't know a ton about vampires. I've never used vampires in the game. I was just telling these guys before we went live. And so I'm looking forward to gleaning some inspiration here and potentially using vampires later on. So why don't you guys start us off and let's talk about some vampires.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know too much about vampires, so I'm really looking forward to gleaning some information from this conversation here. And just getting some knowledge here. So,
Parker,
what about you?
I just want to go, and we'll let Gothnog just talk about vampires first.
Well, that's going I don't know anything about vampires either. So,
no, I'm about to. You know what? We're going to start off this episode by Wikipedia.
Vampires.
Everyone out there. There are no jokes in what I'm doing. This is not jokes.
Sea sparkles. No. Well, I know enough to know that's bad. No, well, I guess.
Well, we usually kick it off by talking about what people do wrong. You know what people do wrong. True. So, Alex, why don't you kick it off by telling us what bad vampires look like? Well, he's rubbing his hands together like a 3-course meal has just been placed in front of his.
Funny, you should, actually, it's a little chillier. Funny you should ask. No, but the I think. One of the things people do most wrong with vampires is they try to follow a particular trope too hard, by trying to follow the classic vampire too much. It can kind of spoil it for the players, because I think that the one thing that gets really lost in a lot of vampire games. Now, if you're playing Curse of Strahd, you know what you're going after. That's expected, but that's an exception to the rule. In most cases, if you want to keep it so that they don't know what they're after yet, try to find a way. And we discussed this in the Great Lost episode that Barker and I tried to record, but utterly failed.
That's like the Great Lost episode number 9. By the way, I think is
something like that. But if you lead into it too much, then it's going to be too obvious from the get-go. And I think that's one of the things people do too much is that you learn too early that it's a vampire. And so that's one thing that I would say people get wrong.
I think that's good, and that leads to learning too early that it's a vampire leads to it being less scary as a monster. And I think that's something that's happened to the vampire. It's something that, I call it the zombie effect, but it could be the vampire effect. It's just oversaturation. You see them everywhere. You get your zombies, and there are 97 different zombie movies made every year. Same goes with vampires. There's a lot of them, a lot of different varieties of them. And it's now they've become less terrifying to us than I think Christopher Lee as a vampire was to, or who is the guy, Alex, the vampire, Nosferatu? Is that the
Nosferatu?
Nosferatu.
That would be how terrifying they were to, let's say, my parents when they were young. That was far more terrifying. You had never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
And now it's like it's almost sexy. So it's you really have to kind of vampires are, and not just make them oversaturated with popular movie stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, And the other disadvantage the vampire has is that everyone knows about them. You know, everyone kind of knows what to expect from them. They know what to do. So, you know, it's hard to make them a surprise. It's hard to make them unique. It's hard to make them different than something they've seen before.
Yeah, well, and not only do people know what vampires are, but most people, even if they're not into horror or fantasy or anything, like know what it takes to kill a vampire too. Like they know the specific,
right.
like you got to stake them through the heart, you know, when they're in their coffin, you know, and that'll kill them. And like even if you're not super into vampires, you know that, and so it's a monster that I think a lot of people hesitate to throw at their players because the players will want to use that meta knowledge potentially in order to gain the upper hand or whatever. One thing that I want to throw in there that I was recently surprised with was I've been playing The Witcher 3 a lot lately, which is an awesome game, and it handles monsters just so well. So many cool different monsters. But I came up across my first vampire a couple months ago when I was playing it. And it was a mission where I sort of figured out early on that it was a vampire, but I was tracking it. You know, Witcher is like a monster hunter, so you have to track the monsters and find them and stuff. And so it's like, oh, I found out it's a vampire. Okay, so I'm reading up on vampires. Okay, well, what do I need to do to fight vampires? I figure all that out, and I track the vampire to this little shack, you know, a seaside shack. And I finally see the vampire, and it's a giant humanoid bat that like kind of walks like this, and it has these crazy like skeletal arms with like little wings coming off of it. And I was like, oh my god! Like I was expecting a vampire, like I was expecting a guy in a cloak like to be in there that for me to fight him. And when it was this giant bat thing, I was like, holy shit! Like I was so scared when it finally ran at me.
It is the Witcher. Oh,
yeah, no. And it's because it did something that I wasn't expecting. It played upon the tropes that I knew, which was okay, garlic, wood, you know, specific kinds of wood, you know, things that vampires are weak against. And it was preying on people that were just kind of staggering through the streets, drunk, drinking their blood and stuff. So I'm just picturing it's going to be a typical vampire. It's going to look like a dude. He's going to look sort of undead and pale, and he's going to have sharp teeth. No, it was a literal monster that from a nightmare, and that I appreciated that it took the tropes, it set it up, and then completely blew the doors open on me. It was really nice.
Well, how about I ask you guys one thing? Just kind of looking at vampires in general, what are the vampires that you've experienced in movies and books and so forth? And you know, what are ones you've experienced, and what are your favorites? I mean, what vampire really, you know, you looked at as, oh, that's freaking awesome. Like that one, for example, in Witcher.
Yeah, definitely that one in The Witcher. I love Nosferatu. Like I went through a silent movie phase where I was just like watching all the classic silent films, Metropolis, Nosferatu, all that kind of stuff. And so I actually find Nosferatu very unsettling. You know, the fact that it was a silent movie sort of helped it be a little creepier and a little scarier. But in terms of, I actually really like the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I enjoy that series quite a bit for its camp and the cast of characters. But beyond that, like vampires have never been a monster that I've latched onto or thought that's super cool, I want to use that, until I saw a vampire in The Witcher and how they look in The Witcher. They're terrifying. And that sort of got me thinking, well, you don't have to do vampires, just they're undead guys. You can make them as monstrous as you want them to be.
Yeah. When I was growing up, one of my favorite vampire it was actually a miniseries, was based on Stephen King's book, Salem's Lot. And those vampires were freaking terrific. There was like a master vampire, and he would sort of wander from town to town and you know, basically, you know, drink it dry and then move on. And you know, he had his minion. And in the original version, it had James Mason was his sort of, you know, sort of his Renfield, but he wasn't, you know, this sniveling little, you know, weasel. He was, you know, a very upstanding British individual who was really smart and you know, knew how to manipulate people. It was a really cool character. But the master vampire himself was that sort of Nosferatu looking image, you know, the tall, almost skeletal looking figure with the tight skin and the bald head, and you know, these just piercing white eyes and the fangs, and it was just really, really terrifying image. And So he'd sort of make this little, his minions that would go out and feed more and bring more to him, and it was just a great mythology for vampires for me. There was no romance at all.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to show really quick. This is the for people who are watching right now. This is what the vampire looks like in The Witcher 3. And cool. You can, as someone, I'm terrified of bats. I really don't care for bats. And when I saw this thing coming at me, and not just coming at me, but sort of teleporting through the shadows at me, I was like, no, I'm gonna do this later.
See, I like monstrous things like that. That's kind of was part of my answer. I like things that kind of look monstrous like that, or look super weird and kind of like Nosferatu. I wanted to bring up. See, I like Buffy also, but I like the movie with Christy Swanson. Like's not a name; it's a fish. Anyway, this is we'll see what kind of crowd we have in the chat here pretty soon. But I was going to bring up Interview with the Vampire, but mainly because I like it when vampires are eternal. I think it's neat that, see, we get one life of man to live, and they live for 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, maybe even more. And, there's a character, Armand is, hold on. Antonio Banderas is in Interview with the Vampire. He's one of these legendary characters that just appears when they go to Europe. They go to Europe and the Eastern, away from the United States, and they find these vampires that are just thousands of years old. And to me, that is my favorite type of vampire. Not only a vampire that's aged, but that's been around forever, and that has affected their personality in serious, obvious ways.
Yeah. I wanted to throw in another one too. I love the vampires in Blade 2 with the faces that split apart. First of all, I just love Blade 2. I think Blade 2 is great. It's got my boy Ron Perlman in it. Guillermo del Toro directed it. I just love that movie so much. And when their faces split apart, like, that's just a cool effect, and makes them a little bit scarier to me, I guess.
Not Blade Trinity. The metal fangs didn't do it for you. That's not your thing.
No, I'm not gonna comment on Blade Trinity.
Oh man.
There was a less known one that I really liked too, which was called Near Dark, and it was definitely a more gritty sort of vampire mythology, where you had this sort of little family of vampires that would they'd show up at a place and they just look like a bunch of thugs, they'd come in, causing trouble, kicking up the place, but they're vampires, and they, as soon as they get people alone, they just start, and not just like kind of daintily, like, biting the neck and drinking. It's like they're just tearing flesh out as they're just chewing the necks apart,
right?
And that kind of vicious sort of vampire that could be terrifying,
definitely.
If you get away from that more romantic sort of classic Bram Stoker's Dracula, or even Interview with Anne Rice's stuff, you get into the really sort of more bestial, sort of demonic vampires, and those are the ones that you can make really scary.
The only one I've ever used in a game was something like that, and he tore out, Matt, this was in the Wins game session 1 or 2 or whatever, and like, I think I described it this way, I meant to, but like the throat was torn out, it was something bestial that wasn't just like, 2 fangs, I just sucked through these holes. It was like, I need to create this massive opening and then just dig my face into it, drinking this blood. I love that. It's just horrific in the best
Did you
way.
guys ever see that Let the Right One In? It was a foreign film vampire movie about kids. Let the Right One In. Oh man, that's a good one. Cool. That's a cool one that plays upon some pretty cool tropes, because it takes so there are things about vampires I like. And one of the things that I like is kind of the ritualistic sort of like superstition about them, and like you have to invite them in, and like they are repelled by certain things. Like I enjoy those elements of vampires, and that they have such an established sort of superstition about them. And something like Let the Right One In takes all of those tropes and superstitions and sets it in like a modern setting, and it's about a young boy and a vampire who is decades or centuries old, but she appears as a kid. She's a young girl.
Yeah.
And the boy befriends this girl. They become friends, and he finds out that she's a vampire. And like, it's a really, really good movie. And make sure they did an American remake of it that wasn't that good. Make sure you watch the foreign version of Let the Right One.
Oh man, kid vampires are the worst. Children of vampires.
She's creepy, man, but she's also like, you feel for her. You know, you actually like feel for this because she's like an undead, immortal creature. So, it's a really good movie though, and you should definitely check it out. But that's something that I wanted to talk about actually, was how can you like lean on the superstitions surrounding vampires, because I like that element of it, without making it so obvious that it's a vampire, or that it's just a run-of-the-mill vampire that is every vampire you've ever encountered.
Have you ever watched the show True Blood?
No.
The TV show True Blood is interesting. It's a very interesting show, and if you're watching it, you know, just it's not safe for work. No, and you know what? You should put it on at work. You should be the kind of person that watches True Blood at work without headphones. No, it's it's one of those shows where you can never tell if they're fighting or having sex because it always sounds the same when you're in the other room. It's but the one thing they do right, Matt, I think, is kind of they wrap in those old superstitions like you must be invited in, but they explain it in such a way that's almost like, I'm gonna do this poorly, okay? All right, I'm gonna do this poorly, and there are True Blood fans out there who are like, I can't, like, already in the chat. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher your show, but basically, one example is, I think if I'm not mistaken, being invited in. The reason a vampire has to be invited in is because years and years and years of history of a family in this house give it kind of an energy. This energy that is bonded to the owners and the kind of the heredity of the people who live there and the memories that were created there. And that's what a vampire is allergic to. It's that sort of like spirit of family and love and belonging. Sorry, again, I know that this might not match up with True Blood, but I like that idea. I like that there's something that garlic creates. It's such a bad example and I can't really think of it, but there's something that it gives off, or there's something that, you know, a home gives off, that's what the vampire is, like I said, allergic to. I think I like thinking of it as an allergy more than anything. But
honestly, I think it's one of the oldest vampire myths too, because one of the suspected origins of the sort of vampire or you know, undead was the idea that in old times, when someone did something against the village or the people, the tribe or whatever, they would, if it was terrible enough, they could be banished. And if they were banished, they were considered dead. You know, literally, they were considered dead. And so they would be sent away, and everyone would just, you know, think of them in that way. But sometimes they would still see these people. You know, they would still see them walking. They would still see them, you know. Sometimes they would return to the village in the night and kill animals, you know, kill animals and take them away to eat because they couldn't survive on their own. And maybe that threshold idea was that they were no longer welcome home. And so, you know, they could, you know, there was that barrier or something like that. It could be related to that. I don't know.
But that right there, just coming up with something cool like that's perfect. Yeah. You know, just a small little backstory or a small little piece of lore, or, you know, energy, magical energy, something like that. These are good ways to describe these old-fashioned superstitions that you were talking about.
Yeah. Now, do we want to talk about how, like, maybe to start by talking about how we can make vampires new again as an idea?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And we can come up with several ideas. I mean, we don't have to come up with just one or two, but, you know, come up with a menu of ideas that people can sort of pick from.
Well, it's something that we like, you know, to when we talk about making them good again. You know, what's a trait of vampires that we need, like, we can't leave home without, but we absolutely need to redo it. Like, what is something that every vampire's got and we need to rethink?
Well, I think they have to be. I think it has to do with blood, right? It has to be they're consuming blood or life force in some fashion. And I think that most vampires that you see in fantasy, in movies, like whatever, it's all based around blood, and they might ingest the blood for different reasons. It might be biological, it might be magical, it might be that they don't actually need the blood, but they need something that is in the blood. But I think that that's like a unshakable thing, that like if you had a vampire that didn't consume blood, you'd be like, okay, well then it's not really a vampire, then it's something else, right?
Yeah.
I like the idea that they're trying to get something that's in the blood. That's kind of cool.
Like, we've talked about this before, but in the Magic the Gathering setting, Zendikar, they have vampires that live in the swamps, and they drink blood, but not because they need blood to survive, but because there's like magic in blood, like blood magic, and their magic is fueled, and their immortality is fueled by consuming this blood, because they made a pact with these giant Cthulhu monsters like thousands of years before, and they're cursed. They have to drink blood in order to stay alive and in order to cast their magic. So that's kind of a little bit of a different take on it, I suppose.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that, when I talked earlier about not letting the players know too early on what they're up against. One of the classic things that you run into is, you find a body drained of blood, and I think I mentioned in the last episode that it would be kind of cool if you had the players arrive in a village and there are no bodies at all, and they just find little pools of blood everywhere, or maybe they find this one place where they were all brought to, and there's like it's just covered in blood, but there's no bodies at all. The bodies were destroyed somehow or hidden or whatever. Wait for that reveal until later on, because that's when they're going to be like, they may think they've been hunting something else, and then suddenly realize they're hunting a vampire. Can be a great twist at the right time. But I agree, blood has to be a big part of it.
How would you do that? How would you go about that big climactic moment where the characters find out that it's a vampire? Do you slowly but surely give them these clues, like blood drained bodies or little blood splotches, and different vampiric clues until they figure it out? Or do you try to balance it in a way that gives the players some agency in figuring out what this monster is, but still allows you a cool little, narrative monologue the moment they figure it out, that kind of arrives them at the destination in a cool climactic way? What do you do, or what would you do? That's all I'm here to do today, is ask questions. I said earlier.
Ooh, that's a tough one too. I mean, I think that, like I said, not giving them too much ahead of time. People go missing. Maybe they find blood. They find maybe find parts of remains, depending on the type of vampire you're using. And
they might find bottled blood that's been placed into vials or something to be saved for later.
Yeah, and then perhaps wait for the reveal till they actually get into the creature's lair, and then they find some of the bodies, and they find that they've been completely drained. And
if they come at that information earlier, if the players are like, wait, hold on, drained bodies, I'm gonna roll nature or something to see if I can figure this out, and they nat 20 it, or even if it's just a whatever you decide, maybe that's when you narratively explain to them that it's a vampire. But even then, do it in a cool way. Before your eyes, the characters in your party disappear and become the face of a vicious beast with dark fangs and bloodshot eyes. This is a vampire of lore, and something like that. And that seems a little climactic, and the players were able to roll their way into it, figure it out on their own in a way.
Well, and there's other ways to remove blood too. I mean, you could have bodies hanging upside down in kind of a slaughterhouse sort of fashion. Maybe there are even ritual symbols sort of carved into them. This particular vampire or group of vampires, they perform a ritual as they're as they're feeding, and so kind of throw in some red herrings that kind of throw them off the scent a bit. make it look like it could be a necromancer, it could be some twisted alchemist, it could what kind of evil thing is doing this, and what do they need the blood for. If you just have like something bit them or drank from them, then it's pretty obvious. But if you make it look like they would just something was harvested from them, maybe organs were taken out or whatever, you can make it look again, build up the tension of it, but then they're still not quite sure what it is until the end.
What if they're like scientist vampires? What if they drink the blood because they need what's in the DNA itself? Like maybe there's a line of people, maybe the line of the first people of ancient Gaul or something. Those people have something in their DNA that feeds these creatures that evolved around that same area, maybe. Or in Transylvania, obviously you can go to a place like Eastern or the Balkans for something like that, and then maybe for some vampires it's a crapshoot. You never know what kind of person you're going to get, so you just hope for the best when you kill this person to drink their blood, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. But there are other vampires who maybe get more particular about it. Maybe they go to the Human Genome Project and they do their research and get the right people, or I don't know, something not cheesy, but I've never seen something like a scientist vampire before.
Yeah, that is actually an idea. Or even if it's not in a modern setting, just having to drink from a particular bloodline, literally.
Yeah,
they have to be this certain from this certain lineage. To feed them. Maybe it has to do with whatever cursed them. Their curse is tied to this particular family or culture or whatever. That'd be kind of cool.
You could link it to the Neanderthal or something like that.
This conversation reminds me, there was this movie, it was a while ago, but it had Ethan Hawke in it. It was a vampire movie, but it was like a sci-fi vampire movie, and it was called Daybreakers, and it was basically mostly everyone was vampires, and they like lived in a vampire society, and they had farms where they like had people that were just basically like cattle for blood. And the whole movie is about there's a blood shortage that's going to be happening, and this vampire population is like trying to deal with it. But they have like vampire scientists that work on a solution to it. And the thing in that movie that was interesting is that if a vampire doesn't get blood, they turn into a monster. So the vampires look like humans. They're pale. They have sharp teeth. But if they don't drink blood, they turn monstrous and bestial. And like at one point, like one of these vampires, like these vampire like vagrants breaks into the guy's house and it looks like a monster. But they're the same species. And so that's kind of an interesting thing too, is that like maybe vampires are like they're sort of like how they're portrayed sometimes, like civilized, they kind of look just like a sort of ethereal looking humans, but if they don't consume blood, that's when the sort of bestial thing takes over. They become more like, I'm just hunting to survive at this point sort of thing. Is kind of an interesting thing that you could play with as well.
Maybe that's something to think about too, is do you want your vampires to be more natural based? In other words, because I've seen vampire stories where they actually have some kind of disease like that can be cured, or parasites or whatever it is that makes them vampires. And then you've got the more magical, supernatural vampires that can shapeshift and they're possessed by demonic creatures. Like in the Dresden Files books, you have the vampires are basically these otherworldly creatures that you kind of wear human skin as masks almost. They are more like that picture you showed before from Witcher. That's what they really look like. But when they're in human form, they look like they're really attractive people. So deciding what kind of vampire you want to go with can make a big difference too. If you want them to be something that is more based in the world, or something more otherworldly.
Is there a way to turn vampires into a good guy that doesn't remind me of Twilight? Like, I mean, is there a way to make them, to keep their ferocity and their monstrous ways and their, I don't know, just all the things we've been talking about, but make them someone that you would want to ally yourself with, or someone that, and maybe, I don't know, honestly, I'm talking about altering them into something new, not necessarily building a story around, well, you have to, the enemy of your enemy is your friends, you have to ally yourself with the vampires. I mean, like, changing the vampires on some fundamental level to make them maybe more Feywildish, or something that makes them come from a different bracket in terms of evil versus good.
You could do something like come at them sort of like tieflings almost. And Alex, this is something you kind of hinted at earlier when you were talking about a curse like earlier or whatever. But basically, like, what if vampires weren't necessarily monstrous innately, but they're sort of like tieflings, where it's like at some point, centuries or thousands of years ago, there was some sort of maybe they were touched by the Shadowfell. If you wanted to include something sort of extra dimensional about them, you could play around with the Shadowfell a little bit, and basically have them be humans who have been tainted by the Shadowfell. And it has instilled in them, maybe the need for blood, but also somewhat monstrous appearances and stuff. And you could do something with it where people mistrust them, people fear them, but they're not innately evil, sort of like tieflings are, where it's like, we look like demons, but we're not all bad guys. Obviously, there are bad guy tieflings, but we're not born evil or whatever. You could do something similar with vampires if you wanted to, I feel like, and you could still make them cool, and scary.
Yeah, I mean, they can certainly be more tragic characters where, kind of like some werewolves, where, they don't want to be a werewolf. They're tormented by the fact they're a werewolf, and they have to deal with it every month. And so, maybe, you could have a vampire that was maybe turned against their will. And so they don't like the fact that they have this hunger that has to be, sated. And so they try to work around it. Maybe they do collect blood, but they do it in a way that doesn't harm anyone. They make up a reason why they're collecting blood, and I experiment to heal people, and this kind of goes into the whole vampire scientist thing, or alchemist, if you're in a medieval setting.
Yeah, like what if you had like a vampire who like pays off a guy who works at a morgue or something? Like, hey, like if fresh bodies come in, you let me know, and I all I need is the blood. I don't want anything else, and I don't want to have to kill anybody to get what I need. And so he's paying this guy to basically tip him off or whatever. Like something like that could be cool. Or like a vampire bounty hunter who has a deal with his clients that like, hey, if I catch the guy, I'm drinking his blood, but I'm only going to do it if I'm paid to do it. That sort of thing.
Or like,
what if it's bad guys?
Yeah.
What if it's like what if turn the whole vampires have these loyal cultists that give their blood to them, give up their bodies for the vampires. Turn that on its head a little bit, and maybe these people are knowingly and willingly giving their blood, almost like they're donating blood in return for information. Maybe it's a religious order, maybe it is the scientific thing that I was talking about, maybe it's these are scholarly vampires that maybe as a high court, maybe they run the arcane university, and this is just kind of how the governing body of the university works, is with this sort of maester Game of Thrones-esque thing, but everybody's vampires, and Sam is in the back stealing books and giving his blood so he can read about White Walkers.
See that? Yeah, that's a cool idea. I'm also reminded of the do you remember that thing in Buffy the Vampire Slayer where there was that character who like got addicted to having like vampires drink his blood, and there was the scene where he was like in the like, it was basically like a crack house, but it was vampires and they're like drinking his blood. He's just laying there like he just had done heroin or something. Like you can really play with it and do different things with it for sure. And that's something I'm realizing as we're talking about it, is I'm just sitting here thinking of all the different depictions of vampires that are in just the modern canon, and just how varied and different they are, running the gamut from like monstrous to super suave and just like debonair, something in between, vampires that have followers, vampires that are just lone hunters, vampires that are good guys, bad guys, vampires that need blood, vampires that don't. Like there's so many different iterations of this monster that I feel like part of the reason why I haven't used them is because I have trouble nailing down exactly what I want to do with them, because there's so many different things you can do with them.
Someone in the chat actually just said, the problem with my good versus evil question is that, quote, if a vamp must drink blood, then people are food. It may be a curse, but in the end, they need someone's blood to survive. That's viewed as evil by most. I think that's smart, but in order for society to survive, law must exist. And so I'm not going to put it past vampires to, in my fictional world, to have the intelligence to kind of move past that and try to work with the people around them instead of preying upon them in a way. And so I totally see why they're evil in terms of the grand scheme. And I think that they do work better that way. I don't want to really pull for vampires as good guys too much, because they're vampires, make them evil, make them horrific, make them scary, as scary as you want. But there are cool ways to do anything. If you just think about it for a little bit, there are cool ways to really turn anything on its head.
Well, and there are people in real life that require blood infusions to survive, so it's not necessarily an evil thing, if you need blood or whatever.
Yeah.
And unless those people let's face it, out to get it.
And let's face it, in a D&D world, the line between sentient and non-sentient is very blurry anyway. So you could be if you're hunting in the woods, you could be eating something that has a name, but the idea of a vampire who I think even an evil vampire, though, you can make them three-dimensional by making them at least a little sympathetic. You can, even if you have to destroy them, understanding that they were cursed because of something that happened to them, or they were turned against their will. They had no choice in this. They're driven by this hunger. You have to put them down, but they can have more depth to them by making them, not just cookie cutter bad guys. And I kind of like that too. And and maybe they do something for the community. You find out that the mayor of a town who's been building the town, been helping people, been looking after orphans, is a vampire. And when what he does is he feeds off the people who were put into the dungeons, who are who committed capital crimes, and he feeds on people who have maybe he feeds on people from a local insane asylum or something. He feeds on people that aren't part of society. So he gets away with that, but he does good things because he still cares about the people, So that can make it for an interesting problem for the players.
Have you guys ever heard of Legacy of Kain?
Yeah. I played there was another game in that series called Soul
Cleaver, Soul Calibur, Soul Fetcher, Soul Digger.
It was
Soul Tosser.
Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver is what it was called. Anyway, yes, I'm familiar with it. Soul Reaver.
I knew which game you were talking about. Would you believe that? Like, I knew it was. I think I said Soul Cleaver.
You did.
That wasn't mine.
That's very close. Very close.
Yeah. But someone brought it up in the chat as something that was good vampire games, and I was bringing up, or thinking, The Witcher's not only a good place where you can snag good ideas for vampires. There are, I'm having trouble thinking of some off the top of my head, but I know I've seen vampires even in Middle Earth based games. Vampires are even Tolkien even had vampires, I guess, in the ancient lore of his world. And I think that goes into them just being legendary and old in all the different ways. So in our vampire, whatever we create that we like, they got to be old. They got to be ancient.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think it's actually time for us to move in the direction of an idea that people can steal. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Should we do we do a question or an idea first? It's been a while. What do you guys want to do? Honestly, we can do whatever we want.
Do we want to answer some questions first so we don't repeat ourselves in the idea and the questions?
Yeah,
maybe.
Let's do the questions.
That's smart.
And then,
so if anybody has questions, they can ask them.
I will. And we got some on the Facebook page here too, as well.
Yeah, there was one that had like 9 or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that up really quick. So the top question that was on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/rollupanddie, where we post whenever we record an episode, we usually post the topic and ask for questions and things that people want us to talk about. This week's comes from Jeremy Lilly, who runs a YouTube channel called Erasmus Expeditions. You should go check out. He runs some great games. He asked a question: how do you make vampires as terrifying as they should be to run across? In my opinion, the moment they see a head vampire, such as a Dracula or a Strahd, it should be like meeting a big old ancient dragon for the first time. How do you accomplish this? That's just what you were talking about, Parker. Is you want them, you want vampires to feel old and ancient. And I agree with Jeremy. Like, it should feel like running into a dragon or a lich, like a vampire. Especially something like a Strahd from Curse of Strahd, like, should be a big deal and a big scary thing. You know what I mean? So how do we do that? I guess
something we've talked about in the past, and I'm actually going to turn it over to you, Alex, because this is something you've brought up, is leading into it, like leading up to it slowly but surely by showing little pieces of evidence, cool pieces of evidence about vampires.
Yeah, I mean, leaving sort of these gory breadcrumbs to bring them in, and showing, how smart and how ruthless this being is, whether they know it's a vampire or not, but kind of leading them in a bit at a time. And I think, I had the idea for the reveal, which is if you can get a reveal where not only do they realize that they've been manipulated the whole time to get there, by this creature, but that when they're there, they're helpless. When they first meet them, there should be nothing that they can do. However you figure out a way to get them, in a helpless state. I mean, it shouldn't be done. The DM shouldn't be doing it. It shouldn't be the creature doing it, obviously. So,
what's the difference?
Exactly. Well, the DM needs to really pull out all the stops in one like this. If you're running a super intelligent, creature like a master vampire that's thousands of years old, I think it is perfectly acceptable to use some meta knowledge to build that, because let's face it, none of us here are as brilliant as a 5,000-year-old vampire is going to be. We may be okay, but we're not that brilliant. And so, but you want it to look that way in the story. And so,
difficulty,
you want it to feel like, if the players can feel like they're on top of it and like, yeah, we got this. We're going to get this thing. We're getting it. And they get there. And at that point they realize that they were led there and that they are now helpless and there's absolutely nothing they can do, and if you can even hurt them in a way, like, get the players to really like some of the NPCs and then have him just kill them in front of them, just slaughter them, and drop their dead bodies in front of them and say, that's your gift. Enjoy it. I'll be back to see you later. And he just turns and walks away like it's nothing. He doesn't care because they can't touch him. That will hopefully scare the shit out of him.
That is the answer to the question. I second that. That's it.
But yeah, in general, just making, it doesn't have to be that specific scenario, but making the player characters feel helpless in the face of this thing, that no matter what they do at that point, obviously there can be a way to eventually defeat him, but in their first encounter, he should be running the show. Because he knows they're coming. He's been through this rodeo before. He knows that there are going to be people hunting him. He knows how they're going to be hunting him. He knows where they're going to be, what they're going to do. He this is just another bunch of vampire hunters who think they know what to do. And he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Think you know what to do. Come get me.
I like the idea that a vampire would be expecting all of the stops. And something you said earlier was that, none of us are as brilliant or wise or intelligent. Brilliant is a good word for it, as a vampire.
Yeah.
And that's part of the difficulty, is because when you're the dungeon master or game master or storyteller or whatever, you have to be. You have to try to figure out, well, what would the vampire do? And I suppose I like the idea of killing an NPC. And the reason I like the idea of killing an NPC is because there are very, very inherent problems that I disagree with killing a player's character. Just like that, obviously that's not something you want to do, but an NPC that they've known forever, just tearing the heart out of them and then vanishing into a poof of smoke and leaving the heart falling into a heap on the ground, like just there. And then like they have maybe, I don't know, 12 seconds of life left or whatever for the player characters to say goodbye. That to me is horrific in the true meaning of the word. I just, it's terrifying. And so I love that idea, Alex.
Yeah. Another way would be to, the vampire has them there, and they're feeling all cocky because, hey, we found them. Now there's gonna be the big boss fight. They're ready for it, and he's not actually there. He's talking through. Maybe he's talking through a mirror, an illusion, and he says, "Yeah, that town that you guys were in. We made all those friends back there. I'm there now, and you're 3 days away. There's not gonna be anything left when you get back. Just so you know." Bye, and then poof, gone. And it's like now they're 3 days away from this town that they left, trying to help these people, and he's there, feasting.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then and as the game master, you don't let them just fast travel to the town. There are like there are 2 or 3 more sessions till they get there, so they have
or even better yet, right after that, all these lesser minion vampires come, like to feed on the party. Now it's like, oh, by the way, enjoy my children. They're very hungry, and then that's one of those cliffhanger moments where if you can end the session right there at that moment, if you can time it right, that's a perfect moment to end the session, to say, we'll just end it there for today. We'll see. We'll get back to this next week.
We'll see how that goes.
See, and that accomplishes 2 things. It makes the vampire terrifying, and it also instills in the players the need to just kill this guy and the need to find him and end him. And I really like that, man. It gives them a lot of motivation.
Well, yeah, there's an immediate sense of panic, like, oh crap, we have to get back. Oh crap, we're being attacked by 20 vampires. Like, we don't have time for this. So yeah, it's and knowing that they sort of fell into it would be great. I hope that helped.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that helps, Jeremy. Do we want to answer another question, or do we want to roll right into our...
It's a special. Let's do another one.
Let's do another one? All right.
Yeah.
So the next highest liked question on our Facebook...
Is Kermit the Frog biting that man on the neck?
That's the other post. Let's look here. There actually was one of the most liked comments was from Kyle A, who posted a GIF of Blade going like this, really excited. So I really like that. And then the next highest one comes from Ollie S, who says, "How would you update a vampire to fit a different setting? For instance, why would a vampire in a dystopian or sci-fi setting? What would a vampire in a dystopian or sci-fi setting look like? Alternately, what are your thoughts on vampires that feed on something like arcane magic or emotions?" Well, we talked a little bit about that earlier, but I am interested in this question about potentially putting a vampire in like a sci-fi setting or something like that. What do you guys think that would look like? I'm interested.
Well, if you're going for hard sci-fi, then you almost, it almost needs to be by definition more based in the real world kind of thing. So that at that point you're looking at some sort of genetic disorder, some disease, some kind of mutation, if you want to go a little bit, push it more into the sci fantasy, and make it to make it more grounded in reality. That's why I kind of like my sci-fi. It's like, I like more sci in my sci-fi. But yeah, I mean, having a well, they could be aliens. I mean, there was what was that movie? Life Force, I think it was.
Like aliens, that's a good idea.
There was a comet that was approaching Earth, and there was this spaceship behind it with these vampires that would every time the comet came through the solar system, it would, they would come to Earth and feed on humanity, and then and then leave again and go back into dormancy, that kind of thing. So they were an alien vampire, which is kind of cool.
That's neat.
So with an alien species,
really like that idea.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Trying to think about other settings you could put them in.
Well, there was a word. Oh, go ahead. You finish.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the word in the comment that caught my eye was dystopian.
Mm-hmm.
It's and that's
kind of like that Daybreakers movie that I was talking about. That's a dystopian sort of sci-fi with vampires, because the vampires rule everything and they just farm humans for blood. So
I've not seen Daybreakers, but that, like, dystopian is my wheelhouse, and that right there, vampires are perfect for something dystopian, because you can, take something like, I don't know, one of my favorite dystopian novels is Brave New World, and you swap Soma, this drug that people take to feel good, you swap that out with, going to report to the vampires and get their blood sucked, and maybe that makes them feel good, and that's just kind of a thing that everybody does because that's the way it works. That I like the idea of it. You can take any dystopian idea or construct and put vampires at the top with relative success.
Yeah.
And I recommend.
Oh, it'd be cool too. Like with the new Blade Runner movie out, very popular right now. What about like those kind of replicant androids that were designed to be vampires? Maybe they were, built for some other purpose, but maybe that's how they fuel themselves with blood. They figured out a way to sort of metabolize the blood. Maybe they
vampires. It's the best idea. All right, guys, I'm leaving. That was a perfect idea. I'm out of here.
Two great tastes that taste great together.
I'm gonna go run to the bank and deposit it before you guys do.
Well, I'm thinking because maybe they kept these replicants in check. I'm gonna use replicants, but call them whatever you want. But maybe they kept these replicants in check by not including certain things in their system so that they could be controlled. Kind of like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Right.
But they found that by drinking human blood, they could get that. And now they were free because they could feed on humanity. But they're stronger, they're faster. Maybe they can, you give them other sort of abilities too that maybe the classic vampire doesn't have. But that'd be a cool sci-fi kind of vampire.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. I love that. That's an idea you can steal.
Electric blood. Just an idea you can steal.
Speaking of which, let's do that. What do we want to come up with, guys?
Well, whatever we decide, I'm ready with this cool new dice tower from Mini Terrain Domain.
Oh yeah, let's see that. Can you show that up here?
Bring up the out.
This gorgeous piece. This entire thing is handmade, and every single thing, I'm kidding. Or not kidding at all. Every single tiny piece is basically crafted out of raw materials.
That's so
every
awesome.
Single shingle on the roof, and I can't stop showing everybody this. There's a barrel of apples has been tipped over, and there's got to be 3 dozen apples that are individually placed in the yard. Yeah.
That takes up a whole gaming table.
Yeah, you need a desk just for that thing, man.
It's actually, you know what? It fits. Really, it's perfect size.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I've got my Wormwood dice tower here, and it fits perfectly in between my computer stand and my little shelf here, so that whenever I need to roll some dice, I just got my dice tower right here, and it just fits right there, perfect. Nice. So I'm glad you finally got that dice tower, man. That's awesome looking.
Thanks. Yeah, I love it.
So do we want to make a? Well, last time, Barker, you and I had talked about we did a in the last episode we did like sort of, what was it, like it's been a while now, a vampire.
We were going to make a vampire party or like a masquerade of some variety using new and improved vampires, and I like the idea of still doing that because we're not only creating a brand new type of vampire for you, which I think we should go with the android vampires, but whatever. We are also creating a setting or environment or encounter, like a party that you can steal as well. So I thought that was a good idea as well, if you are all interested.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds good.
All right, so first we're going to decide what kind of vampires we're using. Oh, that's me. We're going to use android vampires. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. 1 through 4 on this beautiful turquoise dice gifted to me from Drake Warren. Thanks, man. Is going to be Matt. 5 through 8, that's the next 4 numbers, is going to be Gothnog, and the rest of the numbers are me. And that's a 4. So Matt from A Fistful of Dice.
And we're doing like Vampire Masquerade.
Vampire Masquerade, but we're also creating a new type of vampire. Totally up to you.
Well, Masquerade, it can be Masquerade, a party.
A party, just some sort of gathering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me think here. So I'm going to say that these are... Oh, man. These are vampires that serve a specific god or presence, otherworldly presence. They all serve him, and that's what connects them. And he has imbued them with a gift, which makes them stronger. It makes them faster. It makes them live forever. The downside is that they need to consume blood, and they cannot go out in daylight. So it's almost like a cult situation, I think, is what I'm going to toss in there for you guys to work with. And they're hosting some sort of gathering, either inviting people unbeknownst that they're walking into a cult sacrifice situation, or what have you. So go for it.
Awesome. That's a 5. So Alex, that is you.
Oh, cool. All right, so I like the cult angle. So I'm going to say these guys are they are like a cult, but what they're doing is they are gathering followers. They come into the city to sort of bring people into their fold. Some they bring in to feed on, some they bring in to change if they have the right sort of mentality and abilities, but they sort of bring them in. And so what they do is they set up this I guess we'd call it like a trying to think what would be a good word to describe it. It's kind of a
an android vampire builder.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. No, I want to say like a party or a ball, but like they wouldn't really be doing that. It'd be more like they offer services, that they bring people into, to come and see what their god offers, and they particularly prey on the less fortunate, the people off the street, the people who are, the beggars, the less fortunate, the poor, and they sort of bring them in with offerings of wealth and power that they can get from this.
So we have a cult vampire coven that is bringing in followers for power and wealth and a variety of means. I am down to clown. Oh, look, it's my turn. I love the idea that this cult stuff that you're describing is happening behind the scenes of some facade of government. These vampires are the head of the government of whatever area they're in, and they are running the show, and their city or their nation state or whatever brags and boasts about having the lowest amount of homeless people on the streets because obviously they have their reasons. I'm going to throw this in there. I'm inspired by old school movies such as White Zombie. I think I brought it up before, but movies where this collective of people or zombies are put together to work machines or something. So I like the idea that a bulk of these people that are brought in to follow the cult and have their blood feasted upon, I think a lot of them are mystically or magically turned into workers, and they're building something. I like the idea that they are constructing something, and that is the big reveal of this party. Like maybe this is an unveiling. This is maybe some sort of, I don't know, a reveal of the thing that we're working on or the project that we've just finished or whatever you guys decide in the next round of choosing.
All right.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, let's go around again.
All right, sweet. 1 through 4, same numbers. 8. Alex, that's you first.
Okay. So since these vampires are in charge, this cult of this vampiric cult is in charge, I'm going to say that that the city that they run is way up north, and that it's so far north that for a certain time of the year it is dark it is dark for like several days at a time with the sun doesn't rise, and that's when they have their great festival, their great sort of celebration where they bring in all these people to this gathering that's sort of their high festival, where they reveal the true master behind the cult, their cult leader, who no one has seen before. He only comes out at these festivals, and I guess you guys have to decide what he is.
I like it. Okay, that's 8. That's me. And I'm going to immediately piggyback off of the mysterious leader instead of going with the building thing, the construction. I like the idea that the mysterious leader is some sort of monstrous being, something terrifying, something that you would seriously have to struggle to look in the eye and behold. But in something like inspired by a novel like The Black Company, I like the idea of this person wearing a helm or some sort of full face covering that has maybe a scary visage, or perhaps it's even more terrifying not knowing what the actual vampire looks like, but it's something abnormal or unnatural, but a face concealer, like perhaps a bat helm, something like the Hound wears in Game of Thrones, but it's a massive bat and it's jet black and it has red eyes, and the vampire seems to move mechanically, something like that. I don't want to dig too much into it, but since we're only probably going around this once, I don't know, maybe one more. It's up to you guys. I like the idea also that that there's a specific reason that this vampire is showing up for this party in particular, and that maybe the player characters, that's what they're there to find out. Maybe they're there to assassinate the vampire or follow through with something that this leader of this coven is finally appearing, showing their face to all the people, or for at least the people at this party to see. There's a bigger reason to it. I have to roll this die though. This is my one job. I rolled a 1, so that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold on, I got to do it backwards. 9, 8, 7, 6. Wait, 12, 11, 10, 9. I know how to count backwards. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2, and Matt 1. That's you. Go ahead.
I think that was the longest drawn out. We know who turn it is, but we're still gonna go through the motions ever. I really appreciate that. Yep. Okay, so we've got this cult, and they are having this gathering in order to get new members. They're building something, and this mysterious masked leader is going to be making an appearance. I think I'm going to cap this off with the thing that they're building is a doorway. And not only is the masked leader making an appearance tonight, but they're also inviting their patron to attend this gathering. Whatever otherworldly being is giving these people power, giving them the gift of vampirism, they're going to try and invite him in tonight and have him come through the door. And so I imagine that if the player characters are in attendance, they are trying their damnedest to not have whatever it is walk through this door. And they're going to try and deal with that leader before he can invite this thing into the world.
I love it.
That is awesome. It's funny because I thought about a gate too with the building thing. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I just think about like I love the idea of having to invite vampires in. Maybe if there's like a vampire god, you have to invite them into the material plane in order for them to be able to work their will.
I dig it.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I imagine that the ritual would also involve quite a bit of blood. Just, to keep
strangely enough, it's mostly just kind of Costco deli trays and punch.
You'd think.
It's not too bad. There's one guy that brings his guitar sometimes to these things, and that's a little. But other than that, it's not too bad. So.
Oh man.
Surprisingly.
Well, I just kind of imagine this huge this huge, almost like a small little like lake of blood that they collected. That it's going to rise out of.
Dude, that's like my favorite. That's one of my favorite visuals from the first Hellboy movie when they go to bring Rasputin back. And they kill that person, and the blood flows through that like glyph on the floor, and it fills all the little nooks and crannies, and then pools in the center. And then Rasputin just comes up from the center in the blood. Like that's how I imagine that happening. That would be so cool.
You've seen Underworld. That's it. They do a similar scene in that where they have the blood trickling down, and then it opens. I love stuff like that for vampires.
Yep, me too. Yep. Absolutely. That's another good sci-fi vampire thing is I actually like unironically enjoy the Underworld movies. So
I love them, man. I'm a big fan.
Absolutely.
You can also imagine the PCs watching this scene as like all these followers that have gathered are sort of, all around this empty kind of basin. And then they're just all slaughtered and thrown in, and their blood is just spilled into it. Hundreds and hundreds of people just filling the vat as in preparation for this.
I love it.
I love it. And the cultists are just walking by, and it's just like a punch bowl. They're just taking little ladles with it in these goblets and just drinking it.
Every once in a while, a body will swing through the party on a chain, hanging upside down, drizzling into this trough.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, we have table service.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good idea that people can steal. That's a good game if you're wanting to run a Halloween game for your game group. Maybe consider
there's still time.
The horrible cultist gathering with Costco deli trays.
If you're trying to do it,
you've got a good 12 hours to prepare. So
exactly.
You do. You have 12 hours to prepare for your game. I was going to say though, if you have some time to prepare, you could come up with a way to include vampires in the upcoming Harbinger playtest that I just finished bindering that I'm gonna
look at. It's so pretty.
Up with tonight.
So pretty. So pretty. Yes, I'm very excited for the next Harbinger playtest. It's going to be awesome.
Vampires everywhere, everybody. Vampires
everywhere. That's the main. It's the vampire playtest. That's what it's.
Replicant vampires.
Yeah, replicant vampires.
Replicant android vampires that are building something, and leave what you think these vampires are building in the comments. Oh. Right, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. So thank you everyone for stopping by and joining us for this live episode of Roll Up and Die. And if you're listening to this later on in the podcast, thank you for listening as always. Happy Halloween, everybody. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday. Whatever you decide to do, I think I'm going to cook a beef stew in my new enameled cast iron Dutch oven, and I'm really excited about that. That's the scariest thing I'm going to be doing tomorrow. So what are you guys up to? What are your plans?
My name is Barker from Be a Better Game Master, and I plan on handing out candy and watching scary movies with my wife. It's a Halloween tradition, and it never gets better.
That sounds great, man. That sounds great.
It never gets better. That's not what I meant to say. You can't get better. It can't get better. It never gets better, guys.
And my name is Alex, a.k.a. Captain Gothnog, and my kid's going to be going out doing some trick-or-treating, and we're probably going to watch some Stranger Things.
Yes, I'm probably going to finish Stranger Things season 2 tomorrow as well. I'm really enjoying it so far. So
it's fantastic.
Oh, that's so good. All right. Yep. Back from whence we came, the three doughy nerds recording a podcast return to the shadows. Happy Halloween!